Well, we're happy that you join us once again. We're looking at the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven found in Matthew chapter 13. And we've looked at what is probably the best known of the parables there. There's 7 of them there, but we've looked at the best known parable of the sower. We're going to look at the second best known and the second largest, the parable of the wheat and tares, over in chapter 13, verse 20. So if you want to look at that with me, this is a very different picture Jesus gives at this particular time. And so he's going to give another parable here, and he starts with verse 24, and he says this: He presented another parable to them, saying, The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. And while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprouted and bore grain, then the tares became evident also. And the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? And he said to them, An enemy has done this. The slaves said to him, Do you want us then to go and gather them up? But he said, No, for while you are gathering up the tares, you may uproot the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, First gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheats into my barns. So now we have this parable. It's a pretty well-known parable. But Jesus begins in verse 37 to explain the meaning of the parable. And this is probably not what they were expecting, because it's a little different than the one he had just given them. It has a different thrust. So he begins to show the meaning of it down in verse 37. So he gathers them together to explain, and they said to him, Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. So verse 37, he says this, And he answered and said, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. So this is different than the parable of the sower. The one sowing the seed is Christ himself. So while the first parable of the sower could have been Jesus, it could also have been anybody who is sowing the good news of the gospel. But in this case, it is Jesus himself. So this is particularly concerning the mystery of the kingdom that the people of Israel had rejected. And so he says that the Son of Man is the sower in verse 37. Secondly, the field is the world. Look at verse 38. And the field is the world. And so it's talking about apparently the whole world, not just the Jewish people, although that would be primary, but also all Gentiles as well. The whole world is the seed can be sowed. And then he moves on to talk about the seed itself. And he says in this verse, And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom, and the tares are the sons of the evil one. So now we're not talking about the seed being the gospel or the truth or the message of the kingdom. We're talking about people themselves. And he says here that these are the sons of the kingdom. So the seeds that are being sown here are people who are part of the kingdom. These are the followers of Christ, those who have accepted the good news. They're the ones that bore the good fruit back in the last parable. But there's another group of people that he talks of here, and he says the tares are the sons of the evil one. Now, the tares were a sort of a weed, kind of called darnel, and they were a fungus. When they were planted in the fields, they looked, as they grew up, almost identical at first to the wheat, but they were not wheat, and they were poisonous to eat. Therefore, when the harvest took place, you had to get rid of the tares or the darnel, so you didn't bundle it in with the wheat, because it would be poisonous to any who would want to eat it. So it's a very serious situation for people that are working by hand. So these tares are the sons of the evil one. So what has been planted here are false followers of the Lord. These are people who would claim to be Christians, followers of Christ, but they're not. They're sons of the evil one who are pretending to be believers or appear to be believers. And they're sown into the same field as the true believers. And of course, that brings about a great deal of conflict, doesn't it? So here's our problem, is what are we going to do with this situation? We have true believers side by side with unbelievers in the same church, same congregation. What are we going to do with that situation? What should be done? How should it be handled? Well, we'll look at that tomorrow as we finish off this subject of the mysteries of the kingdom.